Hello and welcome. I'm Asuma Katauka and you are watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. At least 31 people are killed and over 115 injured in an Israeli attack near aid center run by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Palestinian media reports the GHF, backed by Israel, has faced criticism over its screening methods and claims of bias. A Russian missile has killed 12 Ukrainian soldiers and dozens injured. Amid training, Kyiv reported, while Russia has claimed that it has captured a village in Ukraine's northern Sumy region ahead of peace talks in Istanbul. China has accused the United States of using the Shangri-La dialogue to provoke conflict and pursue its own interests, following U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's remarks labeling China as a threat in the Indo-Pacific. China's defense ministry strongly opposed the statements, calling the U.S. the biggest threat. At the Shangri-La dialogue, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth urges Europe to prioritize its own security, sparking pushback from European nations seeking balance in Asia. Meanwhile, India and Pakistani military delegates attend but completely avoid each other. Lebanon's health ministry said an Israeli strike on the south of the country on Sunday killed one person, marking the third deadly raid in 4 days despite a ceasefire agreement with Hezbollah. Bangladesh's top court reinstates the country's largest Islamist party, allowing it to contest elections after over a decade. On the same day, a trial begins in absentia for ex-Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina on crimes against humanity charges. Torrential monsoon rains trigger flash floods and landslides in Assam and Arunachal Pradesh, India, leaving at least 30 dead. Officials warn of more rain as water-soaked hillsides continue to collapse into valleys below. Festivities after PSG's Champions League win erupt into riots across Paris, leaving 2 dead and over 550 arrested. Flares, fires and clashes engulfed the Champs-Élysées and Parc des Princes as police deployed tear gas and water cannons to contain chaos. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation has categorically denied reports of fatalities at its aid sites, calling claims from Hamas false and fabricated. The group says no deaths or injuries have occurred during its operations, which remain stable and incident-free. Earlier today, 16 GHF trucks delivered over 15,000 food boxes in Tal Sultan, enough to provide nearly 900,000 meals. The foundation says it has now distributed more than 4.7 million meals across Gaza. While rejecting reports of chaos as unverified and misleading, GHF announced plans to expand operations to northern Gaza and test new delivery routes to reach more people. In a statement, the interim director warned that the aid levels remain far below in what is needed and called on other groups to join GHF's secure aid network, adding that time is running out. Now we move on to Asia. China is lashing out at the United States following a fiery exchange at the Shangri-La dialogue in Singapore. Beijing has accused the U.S. of sowing discord and pushing a Cold War mentality in the Asia-Pacific. China's Defense Ministry spokesperson declared Washington the biggest threat to regional peace, condemning Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's claims that China is preparing for a potential invasion of Taiwan. In a flurry of strong statements, China warned the U.S. against playing with fire over Taiwan and rejected any attempt to use the island as a geopolitical bargaining chip. Beijing also promised to resolve regional differences through dialogue, while slamming US moves as hegemonic. China's armed forces, it says, will now work more closely with other nations to oppose outside interference in the region. Now we have Raymond Vickery guest joining us. He's a former United States Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Trade Development, live from Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining us today. What is the significance of the escalating rhetoric between China and the United States at the Shangri-La dialogue, according to you?
Well, thanks very much for having me. It seems to me that what is going on is that the Trump administration and Secretary Hegseth are, in a sense, trying to play catch up because of the uncertainty and chaos that they've created in regard to Russia and Ukraine. After World War II, all the great democracies, India, the United States, Europe, Japan, had agreed that there would not be an attempt to promote national greatness by conquering other territory, but by trying to promote peace and prosperity across the board. Russia broke this general approach in its invasion of Ukraine. And the Trump administration has been back and forth in terms of its support for Ukraine in regard to that obvious aggression. And this has unsettled democracies in Asia, particularly in the far Eastern Asia, Japan, South Korea, Philippines, and even into China's approach to India in regard to claiming part of Arunachal Pradesh. So what Secretary Hegseth has tried to do is to say that the United States is standing firmly with Taiwan against China using military force to take over that island. I think that the larger problems still remain, that the United States needs to get back to a footing of consistency across the board in regarding to promoting peace and prosperity, and China needs to back off in terms of its obvious threats, not only to Taiwan, but areas in the South China Sea, vis-a-vis India, and come to a reasonable approach to try to resolve these. China's talked a good game in regard to the Secretary's remarks, but the facts on the ground show that they're doing otherwise in terms of edging toward the use of force to be able to conquer Taiwan.
And Raymond, according to you, what role does the Taiwan issue play in the current tensions between Washington and Beijing?
Well, I think it's primary. Beijing has, since 1949, when it was created, the communist regime there, had Taiwan as a thorn in its side. It's not just a question of being able to control the territory. Taiwan and its democratically elected government there provide an alternative to the Communist Party approach to controlling areas which have traditionally been Chinese. The United States and China are attempting to square the circle of how to be able to have peace between the United States and China, and at the same time not have China just be able to take over Taiwan. We've seen in regard to Hong Kong what the result is if the People's Republic of China completely takes over an area. What they do is do away with democratic values which are sacred to India, to United States, to other great democracies. But the squaring of the circle, if you will, that started with Henry Kissinger's trip back in the 70s to China still has not been resolved. So it is unfortunate that we are ratcheting up the threats on both sides, and it's time now to get back to a reasonable approach to try to have peace and prosperity across the board in Asia.
And while we hope for that, according to you, is there any indication that this war of words could lead or affect military posturing in the region?
Well, I think that if you look at what is going on, not only in regard to threats about invasion of Taiwan, but on the whole tariff approach, President Trump's having said that the Chinese have broken agreements made in Geneva, the tensions rising. There was some amelioration in regard to India, but still China maintains that it owns Arunachal Pradesh, an entire state of India, as well as maintaining that it owns rights basically to control the entire South China Sea. So this is a difficult time, and it is time to try to ratchet down the rhetoric and get back to some sort of reasonable approach. War, of course, would be a disaster, not only for China and the United States, but the entire region.
And last but not least, how is China framing its role in the Asia Pacific in response to U.S. assertions?
Well, China is doing everything it can to approach its aggrandizement of its power. You see all across the Pacific, not only in the South China Sea, but extending to other island nations, its attempt to be able to further its influence. It has regularly tried to promote its control in regard to the passages in the Indian Ocean. What it has done in Sri Lanka, what it has done in trying to promote its relationships with Pakistan, show that it is viewing itself as a need to have more and more power. What needs to be done, of course, is to get away from the idea of territorial control as a measure of national greatness, but to look to questions of prosperity in terms of scientific progress, in terms of the welfare of its own people, which is at stake right now since the Chinese economy hasn't been doing that well. So this is, if you will, a reversion to the idea of imperialistic kinds of control. It's not a question of promoting values of peace and prosperity, and it's a very difficult time.
Thank you very much, Sir Raymond Vickery, for sharing that insight. Now we stay in Asia. Bangladesh's International Crimes Tribunal formally indicted former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and two top officials for their alleged roles in last year's deadly crackdown on student-led protests. The charges include mass murder and crimes committed under superior command responsibility. The tribunal took cognizance of the charges filed by prosecutors and confirmed the start of Hasina's trial in absentia, nearly 10 months after her government was overthrown during widespread unrest. The three-judge bench also issued a fresh arrest warrant against Hasina and her then Home Minister Asaduzzaman Khan Kamal. The third accused, former Inspector General of Police Chaudhry Abdullah Al-Manani, Moon is currently in custody and will be tried in person. Prosecutors alleged that Hasina used absolute power to suppress the protest through excessive force, while the two others facilitated and instigated the violence. Chief Prosecutor Muhammad Tajul Islam called for the Awami League to be declared a criminal organization, arguing that the crackdown was executed along party lines. If convicted under Bangladesh's ICT laws, the accused could face the death penalty. In a historic move, the tribunal proceedings were broadcast live for the first time on Bangladeshi television. Security was tightened around the court after 3 crude bombs were thrown at the tribunal gate early today morning. 2 of the devices exploded, while the third was defused. Police are reviewing CCTV footage to identify those responsible. Hasina, who is now 77 years old, was ousted on August 5, 2024 and fled to India amid the unrest. The interim government has formally requested her extradition, but New Delhi has so far only acknowledged the diplomatic note without further comment. A UN human rights report said that around 1,400 people were killed during the crackdown between July 15 and August 15 last year, including students and security personnel. Most senior members of Hasina's administration and party leadership have since been arrested and face similar charges. Now we have guest Shoaib Chaudhry. He's a Bangladeshi journalist. He is joining us live from Dhaka. Thank you, Shoaib, for joining us today. Welcome to NewsX World. What does the opening of this trial signal about Bangladesh's judicial independence, especially with Sheikh Hasina in exile?
Thank you very much, Azuma. As you have mentioned just now, that the trial was put on live broadcast on the National Broadcast Network is unprecedented. It proves that actually the key agenda behind this so-called trial is to demonize Sheikh Hasina and to destroy her image globally. Secondly, as you have mentioned, that United Nations says 1,400 people were killed in protest. Actually, the report didn't say in protest. The report says 1,400 people were killed from July to August 15th, meaning the Sheikh Hasina left the country on 5th of August. So subsequent 10 days, the killings also continued, and targets were the Hindus, religious minorities, members of police, and others. So these are particularly the cases that Yunus regime is trying to suppress. Now about the trial, ICT, if we remember that following the ouster of Sheikh Hasina, Yunus himself declared that they will bring the charge, go to the International Criminal Court in Hague, pressing charges against Sheikh Hasina. And subsequently, Yunus met Karim Khan, the ICC prosecutor. He was chief prosecutor. He was invited to Bangladesh by Yunus, along with some other prosecutors. And suddenly they dropped the idea of going to ICC because they understood that these allegations lack substantial evidences. Now they are trying Sheikh Hasina in the ICT. What is ICT? ICT is a court run by Yunus and the chief prosecutor and all other senior figures in that court. They either belong to Jamaat-e-Islami or Hizb ut-Tahrir or other Islamist groups. So this is, if we say this is this just a kangaroo court. And Yunus knows also that even if this fast trial will convict Sheikh Hasina, they will not get back her extradited from India. The reason is, Azuma, that on 21st of May, the army chief of Bangladesh, General Waqar-uz-Zaman, he met Yunus and strictly told him to hold the elections by the 30th of December this year, which Yunus is trying to dodge, skip because Yunus has no intention of holding election at least for the next 5 years. And Yunus has Jamaat Islami with him in this agenda and some minor parties and non-existing parties. Now, Yunus actually is playing these cards, wild cards, I would say, just to create an atmosphere to avoid the election. This is the main reason. Sheikh Hasina's trial, or even handing her death penalty, it is will be just mere circus tigers. It has no real value or implication. Yunus actually wants to create an anarchy in this country and prolong his stay because, according to Bangladesh Army Chief, Yunus attempted to give the corridor to Arakan Army and sign various controversial agreements against which goes against the interest of Bangladesh sovereignty with some foreign interest. And as we also know that Yunus is a foreign passport holder, 14 members of his so-called advisory council, they all are foreign passport holders. Even the national security advisor appointed by Yunus illegally, he also is a US citizen. So technically Yunus himself is no government. For your kind information, according to the Bangladesh Supreme Court's Appellate Division's reference, Yunus actually is the chief advisor to the president. So the president is the head of the government. Yunus is nothing. Yunus is proclaiming himself to be the head of the government and running these shows, including the trial, as we have heard and you have kindly mentioned. But these are actually all attempts to delay the election to the uncertain period and push Bangladesh towards extreme chaos, and also give the foreign interest the access to Bangladesh so that they can use this land for their proxy wars.
And Shoaib, you have kind of briefly touched upon India. How do you feel about India's refusal to extradite Hasina and does this risk straining Dhaka-Delhi relations?
We know that in the extradition treaty, there is a particular clause that if India thinks that this extradition request has political agendas, then they can always reject. India is not going to extradite Sheikh Hasina. And if you remember, Prime Minister Narendra Modi has said categorically that Sheikh Hasina is his sister. India is not going to extradite Sheikh Hasina, and also India has already seen the hostile face of Yunus, who has been consistently conspiring to destabilize India. So to India, Yunus is an element which is posing security threat to India's national security. And considering that India is not going to give any value to any request from Dhaka as far as the extradition is concerned.
And to sum up all what you've said, what impact could the Supreme Court's ruling have on Bangladesh's political landscape?
Azuma, as I mentioned, that the army chief wants election to be held by 30th of December. And he has also strictly told Yunus that he is not going to tolerate mob violence in this country and few other things. Now, Yunus is, in other words, ignoring what the army chief has requested him. In my opinion, that army will be watching the situation, as we know that from the first week of this month, there will be a long, high holiday in Bangladesh on account of Eid. So I think after the Eid, Bangladesh Armed Forces Army, General Waqar-e-Zaman, the army chief, they are going to take military action against Yunus, and definitely Yunus will be ousted.
And last but not least, could this moment mark a broader shift towards political pluralism, or is it just a power realignment in disguise in Bangladesh?
As you know, that the army has no option, because Yunus is playing with the sovereignty of Bangladesh, national security of Bangladesh. He is trying to give the land of Bangladesh to foreign nations to begin proxy war. So any army in the world, they cannot tolerate or accept such situation. I can only tell you, Azuma, that Yunus regime is now on the Haddon coalition. with people of Bangladesh, and army is going to save this country and the people by ousting Yunus through the military actions, not coup, because Yunus is an illegal entity, and for removing illegal entity, there is no necessity of any coup. They will remove him, and then army will hold elections. Because please remember that Bangladesh army is repeatedly demanding restoration of democracy and holding election. So Bangladesh army has taken a strong stance in favor of democracy. On the other hand, Yunus has taken a desperate stand against the democracy. So for the sake of democracy, our army will, as I said, this month remove Yunus and then form a caretaker government election time and hold and have them in holding the election. And Bangladesh is going to be relieved from this kind of the suffocating situation and return to democracy.
Thank you very much, Shoaib Chaudhry, for joining us and sharing that insight. Well, that's all we have time for. We will continue to bring more news updates from around the world.